streaming. So we are now live and we're going to wait for a couple of seconds. And then I'm gonna start the intro. That's a good idea, I think, to start the intro. Does it work? It works. Hello to In Conversation 30, the 30th conversation. And it's even May the 30th of 2020.
Oh, that's
Uh,
true.
it's true. And I was told that May 30 is the end of the world. And I Googled it, why it may be the end of the world, because I thought maybe it has to do with its dumpster fire of a year. But it's a song, some German song. So we're still here, but there's still a couple of hours left of this day. So maybe. So also hello to the chat and say hello to our very special guest, Amy, on on in the conversation with us. And of course, Amy is also, like all of us, on the chat on YouTube. So if you want to chat with us, talk with us during the stream, you can do that on YouTube. So hello to the chat. Hello, Carole. Hello, James. Hello, Amy. On the chat. What are we? I realized. Well, no, before I talk about what we're gonna do, let's first we introduced Amy. We can find Amy's blog and Amy's photography on Tumblr, of course, on photography by AJM. That is her Tumblr, and we can also find her photography on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle?
It's Amy J. Montico Photography.
Amy J. Montico Photography. And with us also on this in this. Oh, and now our second super special, now not so secret guest, Carole, back with us. And what a perfect combination, you two ladies. We're perfect for this topic. So Fernando also on the chat.
One of us
Carole,
has to think. Hi, Carole.
I'm
Hi.
I'm super happy. Carole's Instagram first. You're reality beauty capturer. No, also on Instagram.
No, on Instagram is Carole Ray Photography.
Carole Ray Photography. I'll put all the links in the description later,
Thank you.
of course.
Thanks.
And reality beauty capturer on Tumblr. And of course, Dr. Fern Fernando. like usual. All things Fern on Tumblr, and I forgot your Instagram.
Oh, Fernando Socorro Art, I think it is.
I
Yeah.
wear your T-shirt today, Fern.
What is that? What? What does that, what?
Isn't that your shirt? I thought.
No.
Okay.
Are you
Whatever.
trying to say that I'm a bad influence?
You are.
Oh, okay. Just say so.
Back. Okay, let's jump in today. I made a mistake. I realized, no, I didn't make a mistake. Well, I make lots of mistakes, but I wanted to make a stupid joke. But we will talk about today. I wrote it in the announcement for this conversation. We will be talking about tiny things and how to make them look huge. And no, it's not about dick pics. We're going to talk about macro photography. How, why, when, and our two wonderful ladies that are with us on the show are, of course, the perfect guests. Thank you, Fern, for inviting them, and also thank you for this wonderful topic because I think I can geek out a bit in this. So and
Yeah,
now
you've got a new
I'm
toy.
I'm quiet and I'll let you all talk.
Well, no, I just wanted to say, and it's funny because Amy, that's exactly why I thought of it. Because a while back, I want to say like 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago, Pete had started messing with the 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 close-up filters, and I think you'd already had the extension tubes, but you started messing with the close-up filters, and I thought it was a good idea. But just to recap, I went to my camera guy at Mike's, and I asked them if they had the close-up filters, and he was like, "Look, you have a really good camera that gives you these really sharp pictures, and you have these two incredible lenses that are expensive and sharp as all get out. You put one of those things on, you're going to lose some of that sharpness, so it may not be worth it." But I eventually, like I put in my post, went against his, because I thought, well, maybe if I get a good quality, which I did, the Hoya ones, which are some of the best as far as I know. And I got the four, the +1, the +2, the +4, and the +10, and have been messing with it. And I figured this would be an excellent topic because Pete had been exploring it still every once in a while. And you too, Carole, I don't think you've been doing that much macro lately, but I know you've done macro before because
Yes.
there's one picture specifically of yours that I still remember to this day. Yes, and I think it was a macro, and it was a picture of a purple. It's a purple flower, and it's the petal, and there's just little itty bitty drop of water balanced right on that curve. And that photograph to this day just blew me away.
Oh, that's
So
nice
yeah,
to hear.
so that's why I thought of you too, and actually Mike Aaron's, but I totally flaked on asking him because I know he does macro. I mean, and there's others, but yeah. So why did you two start in macro? Or why did all of us? Who wants to start talking about that?
Go ahead, Carole.
Okay. Um, I don't know why yeah, the thing is, when I started to photograph, I was searching for something that touches me. And then I discover, I don't know how, but just that if I get closer to what I wanted to shoot, I thought it was more interesting. And I don't know, I saw more possibilities. And then my husband said, well, if you like this, I have rings for you, extension, and you can put it and you will see. And then it was really, yeah, it was such a eye opener. And then because I was fascinated by flowers, it became just more and more. And what I like about macro is that you can see things, really tiny things that you don't see, especially with flowers. When you walk in the street and you see those, you don't even notice those little flowers. But when you look at them from really close, it's like a whole new universe that all of a sudden is in front of you. You know, the colors, the patterns, everything. And that's what fascinates me.
I agree.
Amy?
I think it's I don't know why I got started with macro. I think it was just I like filling the page or filling the screen with something and not something up close, something maybe not everybody sees or not everybody notices.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why. Plus, I just I think at the time I was just messing around with trying to figure out I liked what I didn't, what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, kind of thing. So I think that's the reason why.
That's a really good point, that last part, because actually I mean, it's funny. Now, the three of us do flowers. Pete, I don't think you've done flowers or close-ups of plants or anything like that very often. You're more of a landscape guy. I mean, you do other stuff, but you know what I mean.
I have to unmute myself. I have been doing quite a bit of macro photography and macro flower photography lately, and I think what I posted on my blog in the last couple of 2 months, 3 months were, I would even say mostly, or well, to a large extent, macro and also flower
That's
macros,
true.
which is because I now have a macro lens for myself, right? So
Jealous.
what I've been exploring for that is the lens we've been talking about, Amy, right? This is the Sigma 105 millimeter macro, which is an incredibly good macro lens and even an incredibly inexpensive one. This is not a sponsored video. And so, so I've been doing because when as you mentioned, I had macro like you, Carole. I started with macro tubes,
Yeah.
and I was I tried to get my, or I wanted to get my toes wet in macro photography. And let's face it, a macro lens is an investment, because they're even this one costs between like 300 to 400 euros, depending on the on well on the day, right? On the price of the day, but somewhere between somewhere in that range. So buying a lens for only for mostly macro photography, we can do other things with macro lenses, of course, as well, but that's something you better think over, right? So I didn't know if I was really interested in macro photography, so I got a set of macro tubes, and which is cool, and which is really, which kind of made me want to explore that more. And that's how it started. And so the great thing, but I don't know if you have any experiences with that, but um macro tubes are a great thing for even if you have a macro lens, because we can use the macro tubes with the macro lens, and so get even more macro out of a macro lens. And so getting macro tubes is no matter if you what was I think it's the perfect start, right? Because you can convert every lens into a macro lens, and then if you
Yes.
decide to get a macro lens, you can still continue using those tubes and get even more macro out of your macro lens. And so, in my personal opinion, it's a great investment anyway, no matter if you know that you want to do macro photography or if you're just interested in macro photography.
So
And
I have
why?
a question about the tubes, because what I learned from experience with the filters is that the close-up filters will only do macro. And I know that macro lenses like your 105 are also excellent for everything. They're not just limited to macro.
Yeah, you
Um,
right.
but with a tube, does it limit you to just macro,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
oh, so it's the same as the close-up filters?
Yeah, it's exactly. You can with the tubes, you only have a very shallow range that in which you can focus. And that's the same with the close-up lenses, the diopters, which I personally don't really like for the mentioned reason that they affect the photos or the images. You have, depending on how good the quality is, you have more or less chromatic aberrations. You have pictures softer. You might have vignetting. You might have distortions. So for I think another thing, right? Macro diopters, close-up lenses, however you want to call them, are a great thing if you want to get even closer. So this is just like a bit of like a Lego set, right? You can
Yeah.
Yeah.
add that, and add that, and you can use it all together. So this is I rarely use mine, but if because, and I think we're going to talk about that a bit later, because what I have been doing lately is to experiment with reverse rings as well. And
Ooh.
then it gets crazy. Reverse rings are crazy. And then adding reverse rings and macro tubes, or adding a reverse lens on macro tubes, we get into realms that is even hard to manage even on a tripod, because you get so close that, number one, it's hard to get light on the subject because you're so close with the lens, and then it's even hard on a tripod to hold it, to keep it stable. So, but I think we're going to talk about that a bit later.
So that's the other thing. So I'll chip in with my reason. I didn't know what, and I have to. By the way, Pete posted something a couple of days ago about the exploring of photography and the reason, and finding having a reason and all that stuff. And I don't usually work that way at all. I usually just pick up the camera and go, oh, let's see what this will do. I mean, granted, I know how the camera works, but I have a totally different approach, based on the same principles. But I'll write about that. But my whole thing was, I just want to try this because I have been taking pictures of. Actually, that's how I started, was taking pictures of plants, at the university and around here. But I was just really curious to see, because I liked all y'all's photos and others, and to me, what I wound up getting, especially with the +10, was these pictures that may not have been popular, but some of them made me think of, if I tried painting for a while. I was good at it, but it was exhausting. I couldn't handle it. And that's the kind of painting that I like to do, which was a lot of color use, sometimes complementary color studies, especially. And it was just these flows of color, for lack of a better term. And that's the kind of photos that I have been getting, because I shoot at wide open with the 55mm lens, which is f1.8. And I can't believe I understand what that means, and I know how to say it. But you know, it's the let's see what's. I mean, it's always for me with photography. Let's see what's going to come out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But you know, but with those, especially since I'm doing it out on the street, and it gets really windy here, and you're trying to take this macro photo of this gorgeous flower, and it keeps doing this shit, and it's like, okay, you know, let's use this, you know. And especially with a really thin depth of field, sometimes the magic is just astonishing. So I can't picture using a tripod, but I have found out later that that's what you should usually do when you're doing macro. Do you three use tripods?
Nope.
Nope. Nope.
Nope.
And that's why I don't do macro anymore, actually. Because no, I never did, because what I was always looking for the movement of the flowers, or you know, to try to capture that, you know, something a little bit in 3D, or I don't know. So I really use a lot my bodies. But I had an accident 3 years ago, you know, Fern, and now I'm shaking. I cannot stay, you know. So if I come too close, I shake too much. I mean, so I don't do macro anymore, because for me it was very important it was like a yoga, you know, meditation, when I did macro, to really breathe calmly, to stay really put, not move, and take the picture. But I cannot do that anymore, and I don't want to use something that could help me for this. So no tripod and no macro. So I do something else. No, but I like to move. You know, I like to move around the things that I photograph. And so if I put my camera on something that doesn't move, then I miss something. But it's me. It's just me. It's how I feel it.
No, it's not just you. I think it's the same. I don't like the thought of having something that's rigid, that you're able to kind of move with whatever's moving, and I mean, my partner makes fun of me a lot because he sees me out front and I'm moving back and forth because of the wind and trying to get it in focus. And you just got that split second of hitting the shutter and praying that you got it. You couldn't really do that if you were on a tripod.
Yes, exactly.
You have to
You know,
wait for it to stop, and it just doesn't.
yeah, and
Take something away.
I'm glad you. Thank you, Amy, so much for saying that about that getting just that right moment to focus. Because is it just me? Because again, I haven't explored. This is how I started photography. I didn't explore. I just dived in, and then I started exploring. But one of the things I find is you like both of you said. I literally have to move back and forth because this is a prime, so I can't zoom. Although I wonder what it would be like with a zoom. And then it's getting just that right little spot.
Yeah.
So that is the way it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially if your f-stop is if you're shooting with an open f-stop,
Yeah.
then that is even smaller of a focal point. So it's
Wow.
it's even more difficult of trying to get that exact spot.
So doing that macro dance. Okay.
Yeah,
So I have
there we go.
So I have another question then. Do y'all, because I use the small I can't remember what the term is, but I use the joystick and the thumbstick and find the point that I want to focus on, and then try to get that. Do you all do it that way, or do you use? And I use the really small focal point setting so that it's like right at that spot, the fixed spot. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you all do it that way, or do you? What technique do you have?
I can. I don't have a joystick or anything. I can just.
You don't have
zoom in. No, mine doesn't have a joystick.
You have the 80D, right? Or it's
I
70D?
have the 70D, so it's
70D, okay.
I can zoom in.
I think they removed the joystick, and then
I don't think I would like the joystick anyway.
oh, I
be
love
honest
it.
with
I
you.
never thought I'd use it, but it's amazing. So I can show you like one second. It's like these. Where is it? And you can really I don't know if you see
Yeah.
that. I can move the focus point.
Yeah.
And it's so handy when you do that in the viewfinder and just instead of just have your thumb on the joystick. I would never no, okay. Well, let's say a joystick is I thought it will become probably useful here and there, but I would have never thought how incredibly useful this thing is. And I would think twice whether to buy a camera without a joystick.
Oh, I couldn't picture working without one. I have and mine has the same thing, but mine has it's different viewfinder settings, but mine has the scale or the what's that called, the balance, so that it shows you if
level.
there you go. Yes. So that I mean, sometimes, Amy, you were talking about the dance. I sometimes find myself thinking these people must think I'm nuts, because it will take me at least a minute or longer, but I will be absolutely sure if I'm taking a picture of something, because I'm usually very 90-degree oriented. So I want to make So I want to make sure that it's absolutely. So I'm standing there for like a minute or two, just trying to, and then I'll take a picture, and then I'll try it again. And it just, and sometimes I'll be doing the dance too to make absolutely sure everything's centered, because I know I can crop, but I don't wanna, I mean, I don't mind doing a little crop, but I don't want to have to. So yeah, but with the macro, that whole really, and again, because I shoot wide open, because I love it. I mean, I know I can do, but close it. But I really just like that experimentation, and I'll probably maybe try, stopping it down a bit. It's hysterical the time I spend sometimes, especially with the wind, trying
Mhm.
to get that right.
But
It's like,
see,
so yes,
when you
so it's not.
when
But
you
with the wind, I had the problems too. And actually, with macro, you are so close, then you can hold the flower of the plant with your finger, and it helps against the wind. Because if you are, for example, I don't know, you are here, and what you want to photograph is here. You see, you're gonna photograph this. So you can hold it here, and it won't come in your picture.
That's
But
true, but
you also can enjoy the effect of the wind.
and the burst
that's
mode,
it.
it comes in super handy if your camera has a burst mode and just
Yeah.
do like 5, 6, 7 shots in a row, keeping the finger on the shutter, and then one will be sharp, and then moving in with the
Hopefully.
camera while doing the burst mode and moving back, and then you'll have one of these things will be sharp.
Doing the macro dance, yeah.
You doing the
So
macro.
so do do any of you? I mean, obviously you use burst mode, but do either of you two, Carole or Amy, do you
No,
use
no, I
burst
do that
mode?
when I shoot football, but it's completely different.
It's also great for portraits.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But
Really?
yeah,
Well,
And you use it, Amy,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the macro or for other stuff?
Yeah. No. To the macro. Well, if for anything, like if I'm shooting the birds out, the wild birds that are outside, I'll use the
yeah.
burst. Yeah, for macro, always burst.
Oh,
Wow.
I never did for macro. I even did not think of it. It's weird, eh?
That is,
And the thing
yeah.
is you kind of really have to have enough light to begin with, and 'cause if you don't, then you're still going to get that slower shutter, regardless of holding it down. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and I could see, excuse me, I could see that slower shutter speed and the tripod if I was doing it indoors. But even then,
yeah,
there's something, and here's why I never use burst. And I know this is going to sound weird, but my very first time with an SLR, which was like 40 years ago. God, I'm old. Um, and I took horrible pictures. No, I don't have any at all. Thank God. And the thing that I used to really like was getting for lack of a better term, that decisive moment, whether it was a person, a thing, whatever. There's something to me, and sometimes I will actually, even now that I have well, DSLRs and now the mirrorless that I have digital, I still sometimes will just take one picture of things. Not often, but every once in a while I'll just take one shot because I think, you know what, this just feels, and have most of the time they suck, but at that moment it's that Zen thing that I think it was you, Amy, who talked about. I really enjoy. Yeah, it's again that magic of what's going to happen, and usually I'll only take maybe 2 or 3 of the same pictures of the same thing, because also in editing it winds up driving me crazy having to decide over 3 pictures
Yeah.
that look almost exactly alike which
which
was the
one looks
best.
best?
Yeah, yeah, but that whole in a way that magic thing that they talk about with film photography is what I have always found, which I had with film photography, which is what I still have, the mentality I have, I guess, with digital. And the what is it, 8 years now that I've been using digital. This is my third time trying photography. It's that, oh, I got the picture. You know what I mean? Yeah, so no burst mode, but I can see it. I can totally see it.
It
I can
helps when
totally
it's
see it.
windy. I mean, when the wind is blowing, or even if there's just a little breeze. I mean, the slightest breeze
Yeah.
moves your subject. So, like what Pete was saying, shooting it in burst mode, firing off 5 or 6 shots. Fingers crossed that one of them is going to be where something's going to be in focus. It's
But that's interesting, that you have the same experience, like 5, 6 shots, one of them will be good. And this is when I started playing around with that lens, which is, as I mentioned, this is really an incredibly good lens. And when you this is a 105 millimeter lens, which is about 100 equals 160, 170 millimeter on full frame. By the way, also works on full frame, this lens. And it is an f2.8 lens. So you have a super shallow depth of field if you're shooting at f2.8 at 105 millimeter on a crop sensor camera. So this
That
is
is it.
really, pardon?
Does that give it more than 1:1? Is it like 1:2?
No, it's 1-to-1.
Is it 1:1?
It's a 1-to-1. But the depth of field it's shallow like crazy. So the first couple of shots that I looked at, that I made and looked at, and I thought, well, because I read these incredible reviews of that lens. And because everyone was like, how is it even possible for a lens of that price to be so sharp? And and I was like, yeah, okay, not impressed. Good, but not impressed. And then I did a couple of shots with burst mode, and I just realized I just my shots were simply not in focus, right? So when this thing is in focus, it is incredibly sharp. And then on a 32 megapixels camera, this is crazy. And this is, by the way, because you mentioned it in the beginning, macro lenses, we can use them for other stuff as well, of course, right? We can use them for everything and because most macro lenses are a bit longer, right? Have longer focal lengths. Many people use them for portraits as well, and others hate them for portraiture because they're macro lenses and they're built to be super sharp, are sometimes super unflattering for portraits because they show everything, right? Every wrinkle, everything. So this is why some people don't like them as portrait lenses, and others love them because they are so incredibly sharp. So this is
Close can you get using that
with that,
compared to like using extension tube? Because like with extension tubes, you can get right
right?
up on something.
Extension tubes, for those of you who don't know what extension tubes do, what they do is they reduce the minimum focusing distance, so you can get closer. And this lens has a minimum focusing distance of about 1 foot, and so about 31 centimeters. And then you have that reproduction scale, not reproduction scale, what is it called? Reproduction blah 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 of 1-to-1. So when you take a photo of something, when you're at minimum focusing distance, and you take a photo of something that is like half an inch wide, then it's on the sensor. It's also half an inch. So that means that is a macro.
Being able to be away from your subjects would be good
Yeah.
for insects.
30. That's good for that because you don't have to get so close. That's why a longer lens is sometimes even better. It's a bit harder to avoid camera shake when you're so far away. But it's like this is the Canon 60 millimeter. It's also a 1-to-1 macro lens, and it has the same reproduction scale, right? But you have to get, and this has a minimum focusing distance of 20 centimeters, so 0.66 feet. So you have to get closer to get the same size than with that lens. So this is the reason why. I mean, what do you prefer, right? I prefer uh, the 105 millimeter because I can be further away. And this is like, yeah, this is the 60 millimeter. It's not mine. I borrowed it. 60 millimeter that you can get closer with. So maybe, but on the other hand, like the depth of field with that lens is not that shallow. on with the same f-stop, right? Because the lens is shorter, so you have a shorter length. So this is just what do you prefer, right? What is it? What's your flavor of lens? What is what you should what you or what kind of effect do you want to have? If I want to have a
Yeah.
smoother bokeh, I would probably go with that. And if I want to, I prefer that lens for portraiture, or I would prefer that lens for portraiture, because I don't have to go that far away, right?
But with a 50 millimeter, you don't need to go that far for a portrait.
Right. That's why I said that's why I'd prefer the 60 to the 105 if I'd go for portraits, because I don't have to go that far away. And with a 50 I can get even closer, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have a macro lens that I almost never use because it comes too close, and it's 65 millimeters, but with this one I cannot take a portrait. I mean, I would be too close. Or then, yeah. So yeah, it's nice. I learn a lot of things actually. No, but really, all the possibilities you have with different lenses, it's really, wait, it's nice.
Well, so I need to ask this because one of the things one of the reasons I prefer, and well, I don't have it. So I prefer the close-up lens, the filter, is that I've actually learned how to just take off that, because I have the protective filter, and then on top of that I have the close-up filter. And then what I do is, if I'm going to take a picture at a normal distance, I just take off that, because I always have the lens cap on my camera. I always put it, so I just take off that first filter, take the picture again. It's, and then just put it back and keep going. But where was I going with this? Oh, that's what it was. So the taking off, of course, I cannot handle the very idea of removing lenses from a camera body. That just, I can't.
Why? Click, clack,
Well,
boom, boom, clack, done.
Well, so here's one of the reasons. I actually did it with my camera, and what happened was, immediately all of the sensor got dirty, because it doesn't have, now there I think there's an update that they've done where you can lower the shutter so it protects the sensor. Because on at least on the Sony mirrorless, it doesn't, it's not set automatically to come. So that I had all that sensor dirt, and yes, I could flip it over and set the auto cleaning, and it was fine. And I also do a little blow thing with a little black thingy, and it was fine. But to me, all of that bullshit, which is why I bought the other camera body, because it's like, you know what, I just have two lenses. I'm happy with these two lenses. This is where I'm going with it. How do you deal with that? I mean, it doesn't that whole idea of taking off the lenses and doesn't that interrupt your creative flow? And I think that's my other concern.
Not really.
No.
Well, but it forced me to think of what I want and how I can achieve it. Then if I think well enough, now after years and years and years, it comes okay, And if I'm outside and then I'm not getting what I want, or I have 3 rings, and if I took the wrong one, then I go inside, change, clack, clack, and then I go back outside. But first I think, really, how can I achieve this? And then I make my choice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a conscious thought of, what am I going to do? Like I take the dogs out for a walk. What do I want to take today? And then I just, gear up accordingly. Sometimes I take an extra ring. Sometimes I just, just go with what I have. And when I say, for instance, I want to take the extension tube off, I just kind of turn the camera so that it's facing down. So, no wind is coming up. Take off everything and then put the lens back on and go. I also use vintage lenses. I don't have a modern like Pete does a dedicated macro lens. I use vintage lenses, so it's more of a thought process of what am I going to take? Is it there going to be what kind of bokeh am I looking for? And then I take whatever lens. I want to shoot completely wide open because I have one lens that is 1.2.
Oh,
And I mean, I can't use it during the day because it just absolutely going to blow everything out. Do I want to take images that are more in focus? I mean, really sharp. So then I think, okay, well, I'm going to take my Pentagon or there's a thought process that goes into what am I going to take? What do I need? Sometimes I take two lenses. I go.
wow.
It's
So,
all
Pete,
about
do you have?
preparation, eh?
Yeah, it is. And that's
But then
about as
after you
prepared as
can
I
get,
am.
after you can really listen to your instinct, But if it can work together. I work in a very instinct way, but I have an idea, and then I take what I think I might need to achieve this or go somewhere there.
Pete, what about you?
Yeah, same. First of all, Amy, I loved everything you were saying, and I wanted to say like, yeah, what I loved especially was that you made Fern speechless, but that's not even true because no, because it's exactly that. And I'm what I see. I just went and took my camera bag. Right, this is my camera bag, and so I have to. When I take my camera with me, I have a lens on it, of course, right? When I only take my camera with me, then there's one lens that I take with me, and that's I have to think about what is it that what I feel like doing today. Where
Yeah.
will I be going? What is it that I want to do? Because I can take very different photos with this lens, with a macro lens, than I can take with, for example, this lens, which is a super wide angle lens, super wide angle zoom lens, 10 to 18 millimeters, which is crazy wide. So this is like these are worlds apart from how the pictures will look. I can take the same a photo from the same spot of the same area, and you will see two horribly different pictures. No, terrifyingly, wonderfully different pictures, whatever. So I have to think about, and I also, and this is the great thing for me personally, that every lens, because my lenses are very different, the lenses that I have, the only two lenses that are very close, comparatively close to each other are my 24 and my 35 millimeter lens. And these are already very different. And so every lens has its own character and will tell me, will give me a different feeling, right? So I when I see something over the years, I learned which lens I will need to get the effect that I want. And so this is a thing before I go out, I think because I can take my camera with me that I put, well, where's the camera? That I put in the bag, right? Like that. And then I can take two lenses with me, other than the lens that is on the camera, if I want to. And so I have to think about which lenses I will take with me, which is usually, yeah, whatever. This lens lately, very often, because macros. And then when I'm outside, there's like, okay, I want to take that. I want to take that photo, and then I'll just grab on the bag and I'll change the lens accordingly. So this is done. It has started to become a gut thing, a feeling thing, which is pretty cool because I think we talked about that last time. Different lens means or can mean when the lens is very different, a completely different camera, and so we can do different, really, really different type of photography, and so that's the thing for me.
So that's interesting because I kind of have a different approach, and I well, Pete, you saw this because when I was in, so, but this bag, what I love about this bag is that it'll actually fit both of my cameras, which the other one isn't here right now. And that's what I do. I mean, I usually don't, I will usually just carry one, but if I like, I think, I think I had it. But anyway, when I'll go like to San Francisco the other day, no, I actually took just the 105. But a lot of times I'll carry both cameras. But again, it's the 55 millimeter or the 24 to 105 zoom. And I know what I want to use at that moment. But that thought process maybe is just that for me. This is what I'm going to take. And then again, the gut, because I do photograph by gut. And what I find interesting is that I'm learning that the 55 and the zoom, I can sort of, I mean, it's not the same picture, but pictures that I didn't think, especially some of the architectural ones that I could take with a 55 with a fixed lens, I can, varying from the macro and the plant. So, but I don't have that thought process to that detail, but I can also see that that's a part of the Zen of getting into the mentality of I'm going out to take pictures. I can totally see that.
And
We
the
have
two
to,
lenses that you.
sorry, Amy, let me just catch up with the chat, because there are a couple of things that have been written quite some time ago, and so Bud wrote, "My camera can't take portraits." So yeah, you definitely need a different camera, Bud. So the problem is my camera can take good photos, so I need to buy a new camera.
But isn't Bud the one who's pictures of everything but no people or something like that? Or in my case, no fucking.
Now you know why, because he's
Yeah. Oh, I see. Because with me, it's like, no fucking trees, no fucking people.
Yeah. True. James writes, close-up lenses on an old manual focus lens, wide open, gives lovely soft flower photos. Absolutely. And I have been experimenting with reversed vintage lenses, which is absolutely crazy. I haven't had the time yet to make a video. There will be a video, I promise, soon, about reversed 1.4 50 millimeter M42 lens reversed on my camera without extension tubes, and then reversed plus extension tubes. Actually, the photo set that I posted today to my blog, one of the photos is with a reversed 50 millimeter vintage.
Really?
And this, what you see, this let me see, maybe I can share. I can share the screen. Give me a second. Yes, give me a second. I want to share the screen. Share screen. Blah 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 bloop. This one, I think. Yes, it must be.
Oh, cool.
This one.
Oh.
This is with a reversed 50 millimeter vintage
Wow.
lens.
That's awesome. Creamy.
And this is cress. I think cress is the word. The thing that you put on salad. These tiny little small. How are they called?
Oh, those are sprouts.
Cress.
Oh, watercress.
Watercress.
Oh, is that what watercress looks like? That's gorgeous. Let's see the next one.
Yeah, I have to.
Oh.
So is this with your macro lens?
This is not with the. This is with the macro lens, I think, or was it? And this was with the macro lens. So I tried to how close can I get? And this was with the 50 millimeter reverse. You see that very shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
So and
That one's lovely.
so and how can I stop that scops Tumblr? Okay. So yeah, so you can do a lot of stuff with that. And so I did, and this is really with reversed lenses, and this is the thing, the wider the lens is, the wider the reversed lenses, the more macro you will get. And this goes I took a photo and I didn't find it today. I think I might have even accidentally deleted it because the photo itself was crap, but didn't really show something. But I was able to take a photo of the eye of a needle. Is it the eye where you put the thread through the needle?
Yeah.
So, and it was full frame, full frame on my crop. So crazy, and you cannot, even if you put the camera on a tripod. I had to connect the 10 seconds timer and then go out of the room because me just standing next to the camera produced too much shake. Crazy. So you can do a lot of stuff with that. And so there will be soon a video about that. But let me continue with the chat. But right, usually if I go out, I take all 4 lenses with me. Sometimes I will take only the long telephoto or only the wide angle to force myself to think differently. James writes, I rarely take more than 1 lens for a camera. However, I often carry 3 different cameras on a walk. I prefer to take lenses with me. Steph, hello on the chat. Stephanie writes, I do like you, but I do it like you, but usually take my 3 favorite lenses and sometimes only one to challenge myself. So
There's 2 teenagers lurking behind Carole.
oh, that was it. I thought I saw something out of the. Okay, yeah. Now it wasn't. That was on the screen because I was so focused reading the chat and there's something's moving. What's happening?
So I wanna, because I'm always curious about this, because again, for me, a lot of this is the process. Bud's comment about challenging him, was it Bud who said that he wants to challenge himself and take just the 1 lens? And I know Steffi also kind of said that too. Or I think it was Steffi. Do y'all, all 3 of you, do you all think of that when you're taking pictures every once in a while? I need to challenge myself and try this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think in terms of which lenses I'm going to use. It's more in what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's the way I challenge myself. And then I choose which lenses will be, I think, the more suitable to do what I want to do.
What do you mean by what you're going to do?
Well, when I go in my atelier, I have a tiny, really, really small atelier. But when I go there, most of the time I have no idea what I'm going to do. Or I know it's going to include one specific flower. But then when I come here and close the door, then I have to put that brain at work. And that is for me the way I challenge myself. And then I try and try and try things, and usually I end up with something that is really different than what I first had in mind. But that is my journey, how to challenge myself. And lately I made self-portrait. This was really nude, but I cannot post them on my Instagram because there are so much parents from football or from other stuff that follow me, but also friends of my children. And I'm a bit wow. You know, that's a real issue for me. But okay, that's another subject. But that way, I try to. That's the way I challenge myself, and then I look at which tools I'm going to use to capture or to make an image of it. I don't know if I'm clear.
Totally, totally.
Okay.
What about you, Amy? Because you said no.
Well, no, I agree with Carle. Is that I don't always. What do I want to say? It's not always so much as a lens that I'm going to take to challenge myself, but more of the way I see something or what I'm going to take a photo of or look for something different to challenge myself instead of maybe always doing macro or always doing, just to try and change it up. So I don't, I don't always go out with a plan. I kind of have a plan, if that makes sense. So
Oh, totally.
it's just, I don't know. I guess I'm confusing myself. So yeah, it's just what am I going to do today to challenge myself to do something different than I did yesterday? There.
Oh, so you still think of that challenge thing
Do,
in
yeah,
a different way, but still, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time I'm using a vintage lens. So in a way it's more versatile than say my 55 to 250. I mean, you know, I vintage lenses used in different settings give you a different outcome, and every different lens used in a different way will give you a different outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then if you stick an extension tube on that, then it's different again.
Hmm.
So there you go.
And you, Pete?
Huh. I actually I don't think in terms of challenging myself. I see something that, or I think of something, or I realize something, and that's always what how funnily enough, this is how kind of a revelation that I had about myself not too long ago. This is how I operate, right? Is I see something and I said, I want to do that. And then I try to
Wait,
figure
but
out
but
then I
hold
try
on.
to figure a way out how to do that.
But when you say I see something and I want to do that, is it I see like a photograph and I want to do that, or I
For
see
example,
something and I want to take a picture of it,
for
or both?
can be both, right? It says
Okay.
I see something like this is literally the way or the reason why I started to dive a bit deeper into photography. Literally was I got my exactly 10 years ago. It was 2010. I got my first DSLR, which was my first proper camera, that I bought myself, right? The other ones before I were presents, right, for my grandmother, and which was also, oh, there are so many videos that I want to make, so little time, and so um, and I got this camera with a kit lens, and people told me, don't even bother shooting with that crap thing, right? The lens, don't even just buy a proper lens, and don't so and of course I believe these people because these people had way more experience than I had. So and I but I didn't have the money because I just bought that super expensive camera with with the kit lens, and the photos that I made just kind of seemed to prove what these people told me, right? That you can take really great photos with a kit lens. And so I thought about which lens, but they're all very good lenses are super expensive. And then I thought because Flickr has, I don't know if other platforms have that feature as well, but Flickr has that feature. And back then I was roaming around Flickr a bit, and I looked for photos made with my specific camera and with my specific lens. And I saw photos that blew me away. And I thought, how is that even possible to make photos like that with that camera and that lens? I knew the camera was good, was not a bad camera, but the lens was apparently not good. But people made photos with, and so I started to do research, and I want to be able to do that as well. How did they do that? How? And so I started to immerse myself into how that all works, and which is why I still till that day say you can take amazing photos with every kind of amateur camera and almost every lens. You just need to know what you can do with that lens and that camera. Not every camera, not every lens can do everything equally good, but you can take great quality, high quality photos with with every, not almost, with every decent camera and every okay-ish lens. And so there just need to know what you can do and how you can do that. And so this is why I see something and say, okay, I want to do that. And I know it's possible. And if it is possible with, and this is what I try to find out always, right? Is it possible without having spent ideally no money at all? Can I do it with what I have? Or at least with the lowest amount of money. And nowadays, almost everything is possible without any kind of additional purchase.
You know, it makes me think of a story I heard a long time ago. It was some kind of known photographer, and he was invited somewhere. And when he came, the host told him, "Wow, you make great pictures. You probably have a super fancy camera." And at the end of the evening, he said to the photographer said to his host, "Wow, it was delicious. You might have a wonderful oven." You know, it's about the same. Eh? It's the idea.
Isn't that what? Let's face it. We, as in, or also all you guys on the chat, right? Guys and girls. I'm sorry, on the chat. Isn't that what? Oh, I bet everyone heard that. Each of you, and I, of course, as well. Like people tell you, oh, you must have a great camera. When you see, like a couple of weeks ago, when we after work talked with some coworkers and people showed around their Instagrams, right? And then someone looked at my photo and said, "Oh, you certainly have a great camera." And I said, "Yes, I'm glad that I have the great camera because I'm a horrible photographer, and but my camera is really expensive, so
Yeah.
that's why."
but
And I felt bad after saying that, but I didn't.
It's almost insulting for them to say, "Oh,
Exactly.
you must have really not. Wow, you're a good photographer." It's like, wow, you must have a great camera.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting, and I discovered this. I mean, it really crystallized for me when I had the issue of the young man in the band at school who I took some pictures of that I didn't share in posts with the name and so on. But I was talking about privacy and all this stuff, and I put a post on Tumblr, and some of his bandmates found it, and they were making fun of him because you could tell he just wasn't even playing the instrument he had. He was really struggling, and that's what I liked about the pictures. And he found out, and he emailed me, and one of the things that he said to me was, just because you have a nice camera, you think you can do this kind of stuff. And I thought, a nice camera, I bought it used when it was 5 years old already. It has the kit lens, but yet for most people, they look at that D50, which I don't have anymore. They look at my baby and they think that's a nice camera. For most people, the D5500 that I had, that's a nice camera. It's a a lower end prosumer or whatever, or really a cheap camera, but they just see a nice camera.
Mm.
But and then the flip side to that is I never really worried about that. I mean, I started to worry about it a little bit after a couple of years of using the D50, and I used it for, I'm going to say, 4 years. But when my kit lens broke, because it had the kit lens, the what is it, the 22 to 80 or 28 to 80 millimeter f.4 to f.56 Nikon lens, I went doing research and I discovered Ken Rockwell's page, and we're not going to get into any debates, Pete. And he, and I looked up the lens, and he said, I have a whole lot of lenses and everything. This is a cheap plastic lens. It should not be as good as it is. It isn't. They made over 1 million of them. They're everywhere. You can get them cheap. This is the lens. If you've got Nikon, this is the lens you should use. And I actually bought the same lens. I got it for like $100. And I still to this day have some photographs that I took with that lens that I've actually printed, and that I absolutely love, and that still look outstanding, and not just to me, but to a couple of other people who have seen them. So that whole aura. Granted, now I have a really great camera, really great lenses, but it's not in any way, shape, or form that I think that it's going to make my pictures better. I still take basically the same style of picture, although it also does allow me, like great low light, great, the eye focus. I love the eye focus. It allows me to, but I still have the same vision, if I have a vision, in the same style. But most people aren't going to understand that, which is fine. That doesn't really bother me. And I wanted to just address the create the challenge thing, because
Can I jump?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is a perfect point that you made. With I say, because when we say, like you said, okay, I now have a better camera, but, and I rephrase that, and I hope I don't misinterpret what you say, but basically that's how I understood it, and I hope that's the right way I understood. My pictures or my photos are not better than when I had that not so good camera. Okay, and I think this is a fascinating topic to talk about, and I will also link that to macro photography in a moment, because why on earth, and this is a rhetorical question, why on earth would I even want to have a better camera if my photos are not better with the
Wow.
better camera? And the
It
reason,
depends what you are shooting. I mean, I shoot a lot of football games, and I bought a new camera. Well, it was a second hand, and another lens, because with what I had, I mean, I was too far away. They were too blurry, and I could try to understand my camera the best I could. Still, it was not good enough. So, that there is a limit. It depends what you want to shoot and
Yes,
the
yes,
circumstances
yes,
around it.
yes, yes.
I would
Yeah.
go even further and say, I can do almost, not everything, of course, but like 95% with what I do, I could do with my 10-year-old completely. I don't know if you see that on camera, how you can see that on camera, this camera is completely falling apart. This is my 10-year-old my first DSLR, the Canon 550D Rebel T2i, and I can do almost 95% of what I can do with my super new 90D. I can do 95%, could do 95% of that with the 550D. But
Yes. Go ahead.
and this is the point. It's so much easier to do that with a 90D. It is so much easier to do that with a 90D. And the 90D is also, look how this thing is falling apart, literally falling apart. The 90D is built like a tank. I could bash rhinos to death with that camera. I don't say you should bash. Of course, don't do that. Never, don't bash anything or anyone to death. But it would be possible because this thing is built like a tank, and this is the difference. Now has been probably a bit different 20 years ago, but now it's the more professional cameras. They are just they are either have very specific possibilities that they give us. So in specific areas, we can work with them more precisely than we
Yeah.
can do that with more consumer type of cameras, and they are probably a bit faster. They allow us to do things more easily, and they are built better. And that's the only difference. I would not wanna go back to my 550D, but I know I could do the same things with that camera, and this is just
Well,
convenience and more
well,
fun. It's more fun to work with that better type of gear.
so let me that last thing you said, I would have to disagree to a point. For me, I still miss my D50. My baby, and I did the fun I had with that camera and that cheap rinky dinky
But I'm
zoom
sorry,
lens.
question. You talk about the Nikon D50 compared to your Sony camera now,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes, yes, because I had the D5500 for a year and the Fuji F100 X100F, those two cameras. I had those for a year, and then I got the Sony. And I love my Sony. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, there's just I feel one with my camera, and I don't know if you all feel
But
the same,
Yeah.
but there's a
right?
difference in that because
Yeah,
cameras
definitely.
are basically the same. It's just this is just like the small version of that. So there's no real difference between these cameras. And I think the Nikon camera is very different to the Sony. So there's a different
Yes,
feeling to that camera. These cameras
but
feel
it's
the same. These feels just like the small brother to that. And so I don't really miss that camera. I think this
yeah, but even when I had the Nikon D5500, which was very similar, the body, I agree with you, it just wasn't the same feeling. There was something
that's
about
what I
the
meant.
D50, but there was something about that D50. There was something about the images that I took with that D50, and I mentioned it in my post about using the plus 10 close-up filter. One of the things that I mean, I love the Sony, don't get me wrong. I love the sharpness. I like the increased sharpness from the D50 that I had in the D5500 and the Fuji. And this thing that I have now blows both away because of the lens. But there's something, and I keep looking at classic photographs. And who was I looking at the other day? One of the articles I posted on Tumblr. There's just even when you look at the classic photographs. Oh, Stern and the Marilyn Monroe pictures. That's what it was. You look at them and they're blown up. And we can debate this all that we want about film being sharper, blah blah blah. But the bottom line is, a lot of times you look, there isn't that sharpness, there isn't that precision, but there's some beauty to the composition and the moment that he captured, the expression that he captured, the gesture, the composition that just blows all of that other sharpness shit out of the water, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that given that these images are classics and not just Stern, but when you start looking at classic photographs, we're so fixated with sharpness and all that stuff that I think we lose sight of that realistic blurriness. Which, and I'm going to jump the shark here. When you look at a painting, for example, we can look at paintings, in portraits, for example, in paintings. But when you really get up close, and if you do a pixel peep on a painting, it's not sharp. It's
No.
blobs of paint. But when you stand away and look at it, there's just something that speaks to you. So to me, which is my roundabout way of getting to the fact that the Sony is sharp, but sometimes I look at the sharpness of those images and it's too sharp.
Hmm.
It's too precise. Um, And for portraiture, I don't mind it that much because there's something that it gives. It lets me give a certain extra depth to it. But again, I don't want to beat that sharpness to the point that, or use it to the point that you lose sight of the humanity of the about the person as opposed to a picture of a person. Getting back to your comment a couple of months ago, um, and that's one of the things I miss about my D50. That the flower shots. There's one that I have in my office that's an iris. That's just this one little flower, and it's but that photograph, I look at it and it just still makes my heart sing. Some of my other Sony photographs do the same thing, but especially with those flower images, those more close-up images, I miss the human blurriness of it, for lack of a better term, which is why now getting back to the macro, see how I connect everything eventually. To the macro, that's what I really liked about especially the times 10, the plus 10, and I think that's going to be my favorite, is getting up really close, and it's like 3 inches. It's like what, 2 centimeters or a centimeter and a half. I mean, it's just like really close. The wind, the shaking, because you have to hold it, but the joy of seeing maybe like the one picture of the little tip of the leaf just swallowed up by green and red. That photograph, I see that photograph and it brings joy to my heart, because there's this very infinitely sharp point, and then everything else just blows up into color. But again, that's the kind of thing I can do with my Sony. And also one of the reasons I bought the Sony, and it was either the Sony or the D850, but I like the Sony feel, and it wasn't as heavy and it wasn't as big as the D850, which is a lovely camera. Was because I could do one of the things that I love to do, which is take portraits of people indoors in low light, and also that eye focus. That's what sold me on the camera, the eye focus and the feel. But I still miss my D50. There was something magical about that camera, which I can't describe.
Sometimes I think that sharpness, crispness is overrated. I think in some cases, softness speaks louder than sharpness. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I think what we often forget is that sharpness is just one part, right? I mean, this is, and I don't understand that extreme focus on sharpness either, because when we look, and this is when very often the same people who glorify, which is nothing bad, of course, it's a matter of taste, but it's the glorification of analog photography and how analog is so much better than digital, and then the thing is, when we look at an analog photograph, if we put it like at the same magnification as we see our digital photos on our screens, and that's when you scan a photograph or we scan a negative, it's not sharp at all. And so, but these are very often the same people who discuss how, no, you can't use this lens, or you can't because it's not sharp enough, and it's not, which is, sharpness is one aspect and one element, and if something is reasonably sharp, and this is then this is what we're talking about, right? Because there's no such thing as perfect, because everything in art, and especially in photography, is a matter of, at least to a very large degree, a matter of personal taste and of personal
Yes, definitely.
perception.
Yeah.
Same thing with noise, right? How much noise are you willing to accept? When I and it's also something you get used to. When I shot with my 550D, I didn't go over, hardly ever went over ISO 1600. Very rarely, only if I really had to. Now with the 90D, I can easily shoot at 1600, 6400 ISO, 12,800 ISO, and it's still less noisy than 1600 with the 550D. And now I say, no, this is too much for me. It's just how our own perception changes over time, and how probably also the more photos we see and the more we immerse ourselves into this whole thing, the more critical we get. So I think that's a whole big topic for itself.
Amy, what were you going to say?
Well, I think as far as sharpness and I think there's a place for it. Like when you do your architecture firm, I think it's
Oh,
they have. I think in those cases you need those sharp edges. You
yeah.
need to see the details when there's when they're just minuscule. Within the building themselves, maybe the textures. Whereas with the flower, I don't always see that. I mean, obviously you don't want it to be blurry, but the sharpness is not as necessary in my opinion.
Right.
And like,
right.
It's
That's why, for
Well-
example, I love. Sorry. Someone wanted to
Oh
say?
no. So
No,
no. The Go ahead, Pete.
yeah, sorry. This is probably the delay that we have. So that's why I love to shoot portraits. Back at portraits again with my 50mm, with my cheap plastic 50mm 1.8 Canon lens, which is an incredibly good lens, and it's incredibly sharp at like f4, f5.6, incredibly sharp. But if at f1.8, it is slightly soft. But that exactly is what I love about that lens for portraits, because this softness that the lens creates is a is very, very, it adds sort of a glow to the skin, which you cannot, at least I haven't found a way to mimic that in any other way. And so it's just sometimes it adds something, and it's a matter of what you said, Amy. It's the question of purpose. Sometimes we need sharpness, and we perfect sharpness, and sometimes it's just distracting.
So I'm glad you brought up portraits because I do like the sharpness, like the photos of my mother. That are the pretty much close up, just the headshots, talking, which I did. I think the 3 or 4 times I was down there, and it's always the same restaurant that we visit frequent often, and it's almost always the same table, and she's facing outdoors, so the light is perfect. But I like, without making her look old and aged and wrinkly, but she's in her 90s now. She's late 80s and 90s. She's old and wrinkly, and I like that. That character, and even for the kids, I do like for portraits the sharpness that my camera brings. Now the issue is in post. What do I do with that? And there's 2 things that I'm thinking about. And I was originally thinking about, speaking of sharpness, one of the photographers who took one of the photographs that I still have in my brain, or which is the cover for Carly Simon's Spy album, which is a black and white. No, it wasn't Spy. It was another one. But anyway, it was a black and white photograph. I looked up his photography on the web, Norman Schiff, and I found, which has to be in the processing, they either sharpened the image or something. But one of the things that was incredibly distracting was the close-ups. You could see like the facial hair on some of these people, and you could actually see the little white hairs so sharply and so crisply against the grayer skin that it was totally distracting. So I think that was overdone in post. The other thing that isn't about sharpness, but that I do worry about, like for pictures of like my mother, and a couple of people suggested that I should increase the contrast. And to me, that would be
Mhm.
about emphasizing the crevices, if you will, the canyons and the wrinkles and so on, and not really expressing or help or not really help express the about my mother, shrugging, like there's one where she's going, I don't know, or laughing or something like that. It would be more about the contrast than about the person. Does that make sense? And I
Yes,
think the
totally.
Yeah.
sharpness would be the same thing.
I don't,
So
I
yeah.
don't know about you guys, but especially on Instagram, you see these heavily edited photographs of people with, older people with wrinkly skin, or people that have been out in the sun, and they're so heavy and so over processed, and I just think, no.
Yeah.
Whereas something with your mother, that's not what you would want. You would want
Right.
something light and natural, something that this is my mother. This is how I know, I recognize her. This is my mother. This is my grandmother.
Right, right.
I
Well, I
just,
don't know if I would if I would describe my mother as light and natural, but she's
but you know what
definitely
I
not
mean.
light.
When
Yeah, but I know exactly. No, I know
20
exactly
years
what
from
you
now,
mean.
you
Yeah,
look at a
yeah,
photograph
yeah.
of your mother, and you
And it's
think,
her.
yeah, that was her.
Yes, yes.
That's
And
what you.
that's a good point. I look at those pictures now, and I see that. I see my mother. I mean, I see, and it's funny because just as an aside, there's a photograph I remember of her, which used to be, oh my God, I'm so old. Used to be in the dining room. We didn't really have a living room. It was just a little dining room. It was a portrait of my mother in a halter white dress with blue. I remember, and she had the curly hair, which she's always had. And to me, and she was younger. She must have been in her 30s. And to me, the pictures that I took always remind me of that photograph of my mother, which is in color, not even in black and white. And it was one of these, painted in color kind of things. Um, but it's that same thing. So that's an interesting point, which I'd never. I mean, I've thought of, but I'd never really. That those pictures of her in her 90s and late 80s remind me of that picture of her in my mind of when my mother was young. But it also shows she's fucking old. You know, because that's my objective, and that's one of the ways I think. Again, going back to having the more expensive camera, it's not a better photograph, but that camera allows me to take pictures that capture not the person, but to capture that moment and to capture that feeling in a way that the other one could, but the way that this one has the enhanced capability of ISO, higher ISO, low light handling, and so on. I don't have to worry, and I'm guaranteed a better quality picture than with the other one, as far as the technical quality,
Mm.
if that makes
But
sense.
let me take this thought and bring the conversation back to macro
Macro.
photography, because interestingly enough, that's why, and I mentioned that in the beginning, that some people do not like macro lenses as portrait lenses because they are technically too sharp, too good, too precise. And that's why a lot of people say, no, the portraits look too harsh. And I think by thinking about that is from a sheer gear standpoint, right? From a sheer technical standpoint, macro photography is a very, very, or can be a very, very technical type of photography, not so
Mhm.
much from a gut approach, because let's take the example, macro lenses, right? They are built to have, because we want to see all the fine details. We go very close. We want to represent. We want uh, I'm sorry, I'm probably a bit distracted today because of horrible headaches. But these lenses are built to reproduce in a two-dimensional way, right? Um, all these fine details, they're built to give us a perfect image, as opposed to other lenses maybe that we like for their character, right? You talked about vintage lenses, Amy. So all these, I have a handful, as you know, I have a handful. uh, Vintage lenses, M42 lenses, and each of these lenses, even though there are three 50 millimeter lenses, and each of these lenses is different, and they give me a different feel. They have different contrast. They are differently sharp. They give different types of detail. One is this I think a 37 millimeter lens, very weird focal length, and it has a super strange way of rendering the images. It has some sort of a blur.
The Tacumar.
Pardon?
The Tacumar.
No, not Tacumar. It's a 37 millimeter. I don't. I'll tell you later. I'll have to. I put it in the cupboard. I'd have to get it. And I think this is a very, very interesting thing, and also connecting to what I said before. I started with extension tubes, and you can do incredible things with extension tubes and just a normal lens. Yes, a normal lens, a not macro lens, will never be, or probably never be, as sharp and as detailed as a real dedicated macro lens. But you can do fascinating stuff with that. But why then getting a real macro lens if you're not really, if you don't really want to have all that extreme perfect sharpness and clarity, etc. If that is not necessarily your concern, then still it is it's so much easier to shoot with a real macro lens, because you have all of that. You have autofocus, you have that focus that goes beyond that very shallow focus range that you have with macro tubes, or with reverse adapters, or with diopters, close-up lenses. So basically, it's the same thing as with getting more expensive gear. It's just easier to get.
And you get closer. If I compare what I can reach with my 3 extensions, and how close I can be if I use my macro lens. With my macro lens, I come really, really close into
Really?
details. Yes.
In my case, I can get much closer with a 50 millimeter lens, and with my extension tubes, I get closer than with a macro lens, and with a reverse
Oh,
lens,
not me.
even
No.
closer. Really? Interesting.
Yeah, really.
And it's funny
really?
because
And I have a 65 millimeters, but with this, I can really. I come too close. It's almost like if I was a scientist and that I study a bacteria. That's why I don't use it. But it's just me. But it's really, it comes so close that it's really.
But again, I think that would depend on the lens, the tube, and so on. Because because, by the way, getting back to my D50, to my baby, with that kit lens, I had of all of the lenses I had, that was the one that I could actually, wasn't a macro, but I could shoot the closest with that one. So again, I think it just depends on the lens. Can we get Pete? Can you go to YouTube, because I know there's other comments?
Yes, of course.
You're good at that.
Comment. What was the last comment? The one that I read by Steph. Then Bart writes, sometimes it seems to me that I'm always taking photos of the same things. I'm lazy. If I take only a long or short lens, I have to work harder. Yeah, that's. But this is actually an interesting thing. I have. There's a forest just behind the house where I live, 5 minutes from here by foot, and taking a different lens, and I've been there like a million times. I took photos of every tree like 7 million times. So, but when I take a different lens with me, I can do different things. So this is even if we go to the same places and take photos of the same things with different lenses, we can take different photos and we can get very different things because and I think this is also something that we have to have in mind. If we have a different lens, we have to take different photos because we cannot take the same photos with a different lens very often. So we have to change. We have to change the position. We have to get closer or further away, or we have to use a different angle.
Well, and to me, the whole idea, I mean, and granted, I take pictures of a lot of different stuff, whatever hits my eye or my imagination. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking pictures of the same thing. And I also think that even if you are taking just, because this was my experience, pictures of the same thing with the same setup, um, time of day, the way where you stand, what you see at that moment. Sometimes I would see different things. It doesn't ever really, for me, it's never really felt like a reproduction. And I do not as often, but I did when I was with my baby. Actually, I would photograph at the botanical conservatory here. Granted, there's a lot of different plants, and sometimes they'd move them and all that stuff. But I would take sometimes a lot of pictures of the same plant, but just in different ways, and it was always something different. So if you want to think of yourself as lazy, more power to you, but it can also be a creativity thing. And I don't, getting back to my challenge question I asked, because as I've said a million times before, I don't think of myself as being creative as much as I see things without thinking about it. That's just what I see. But it depends on how you approach it. Bottom line to me.
Well, I think
Anyway,
that's
sorry.
the whole thing about being creative is seeing something that somebody else doesn't see and photographing it. So you are creative.
Okay, Pete, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with Amy. I think this is exactly well, this is the one big part of that. Seeing things differently than other people see them. And I mean, on the one hand side, it's easy because we're all different people. We do see things differently automatically because we have different heights, we have different backgrounds, we have different experiences, so we do see things differently. The thing though is, and I think this is also one very important factor of that all, there is usually a very limited way how to do things easily, and that's what most people in the beginning, they do it just the way that is easy. And I think
Macro
the
is not
really
easy
great
though.
pardon?
Macro is not easy.
No, macro
Yeah,
is not easy, but
No.
and to
let let me just
Well,
try
wait,
to
wait,
finish the
but
sentence.
I want to
But there's
challenge
an
that for a second, because to me, when I first started, and even now, it never feels easy.
no, no, no. I probably worded that wrong, or maybe I just didn't finish the sentence. Cough, cough.
Sorry.
There's there's um the easiest way to do something is usually the way how we start doing it. We will when we let's put macro aside for a moment. When we have a camera, we usually take the camera up to our eyes and take a photo from our eye level. And then a more which is already you see things, I look this way, you look that way. This is a different photo, right? But then there's when we a very very creative person will automatically say, okay, no, I don't do it this way. I just go, I crouch down, or I squat and take a photo from that perspective, and I'll tilt the camera or whatever, right? So we will usually, most of us will start with the easiest way of doing something, which is nothing bad at all. I think this is even a very, very important thing to do the obvious, do the easy thing, then it's out of our heads. And then a lot of people will say, okay, I've done that. I'll stop and I'll move on and do something else. And then there are people who say, no, okay, I want to find different ways how to do that. So doing the same thing over and over and over again until that moment when we say, no, okay, I'm fed up with that. I want to do things differently. I think this is a very important and very vital part of a creative process to just get to the point where we can check that box and move on to a different viewpoint, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Go back
I
to
think
YouTube. Oh,
I think a creative person can. Okay, it's somebody picks up a camera and takes 100 shots of the same thing, and they think, "Oh, well, they're all the same. This is not for me. I'm not going to do this." Or the creative person does think, "Well, what happens if I shoot it at an angle? What happens if I, crouch down and get it lower? Or maybe I take it from straight above?" Or
Mm.
that's where the creative process comes in, whereas a non-creative person that thinks photography is easy,
Mhm.
oh, just take a few shots and look.
And that's where curiosity comes in, right? Am I curious what I can do with that? Or, and this is why I personally, I mean, you all know me, you four of you know me, how much I always rant against rules, right? This is when we're this is how to do that. How can I do that? And this is then, okay, I did it that way. I get my grade, right? I get my A, and then I can file that, and I'm off to the next thing. And say, no, 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 no. Don't be satisfied with having done it the way it is supposed to be done. Try a different way. What if, like you said, Amy, what if I do it this way? What if I do it that way? Really being curious, exploring what can be done. I think that is what creativity is about, finding ways that are not um, already laid out for us, right? That are in a book. It's not creative. Of course, it is to a certain degree creative because we have to do it, but it's not creative to do something exactly the way it is shown us in a tutorial. Click here, click there, do this, do that. But taking what is in that, I call it tutorial or book or whatever, taking the essence and making something else out of that, making it our own, and create something
Yeah.
create something new um, out of the.
It-
It's like a Lego, right? A Lego things. We have the bunch of Lego bricks, and yeah, they're all the same. But if I give them to you, you would put the red one on the blue one, and I will put the yellow one on the blue one. These are different things. And I think this is why it's so incredibly fantastic. And I just want to pat little Fern on the back and thank him very much for being allowing me to do this here. And of course, you lovely ladies for being part of that, and you lovely people on the chat. We have been doing this here for the 30th time, and this is so stimulating, creatively stimulating. And it's just, I think this is what creativity is also about,
okay.
exchanging
So
thoughts. So
now you're going to hate Fern, but get back to YouTube. And we've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes. So go ahead, please. Can you get back to YouTube, please? Because I know they've made comments, and I'm not as good as you are
the
about that.
comments now. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, we know you're sorry.
I didn't understand what he said. Carole replied to Bart by saying it's a great way of challenge yourself. James wrote, if it is too easy to get a good photo, I feel that I haven't worked for it. Oh, I feel you so much, James. I feel you. So I like old cameras because they make me work harder and think more. Where it's the same thing as we we're talking about lenses, right? Which lens do we take with us? Lenses do we take with us? Which lens will fit? What can we do with that? It's this basically the same thing. What James said, right? Taking 3 cameras with him instead of 3 lenses. Bart writes, my photography is limited by my talent, not my camera. as true with my Canon AE1, which I still have, as it is with my Canon 5D Mark III. So couldn't get any more true. Photography is limited by my talent, not my camera. I don't think that anyone, of at least not anyone that I know, me included, could ever really use any kind of camera to its full potential. So the limits is beautiful. My photography is limited by my talent. And the great thing is we can improve the talent.
Yeah.
It's the good thing, because it's a muscle, right? That we can just
Or sell the camera and walk away, which I've done twice. Or not sell it. One broke. Actually, both of them broke, and but yes.
But I think that's why you love your baby so much, was because that was the camera that this whole world opened up to you of,
Yes.
you know what, I can do this, and you know what, I'm pretty
Yes.
good at it.
Yes, yeah, totally. It's funny when I was talking about that, I thought that. So I think we should wrap up because we're losing Carole and Pete. God, if we could only lose Pete, but especially Carole because it's getting dark out there. So anybody have some last words?
Yeah, let me take a photo of you. No, film it. I just wanted to brag a bit. Look at that beauty.
It's
Nice.
gorgeous. All right, enough already.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
we
not
know.
sorry. Why am I lying? I'm not sorry at all.
All right, so any last words, Carole and Amy?
No, thank
No,
you for
just-
inviting me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
fun.
you for joining. It is a pleasure. It was a pleasure. It is a pleasure. And I think
Carole, you actually came back.
I think it was
Yeah, I was resting
third
my back.
No. I mean, you came back because you joined us once before, didn't you?
twice.
Yeah.
What, twice even?
Yeah, twice before.
Right. It's the third
Oh.
time with us.
Wow.
You just have to invite me and I will show up.
You're
Okay.
invited every time automatically. So feel yourself invited.
No, but
every
the thing, I don't go often on Tumblr. I try, but to manage, I'm more on Instagram. So every time I go to Tumblr, I think, oh, I should come there more often. And yeah,
I know how to get a hold of
Carole's
you.
Instagram, Carole Ray Photography. The link will be in the description.
thanks.
And Amy J. Montico Photography. No, Amy J. Montico Photography. Is that your Instagram, Amy?
Yeah, I believe so.
So also will also be in the description.
And I'm finished. Pete, you want to wrap this up?
I want to wrap this up. So first of all, thank you all for being part of this. Amy, Carole, Fern. No, of course, but without you, this all wouldn't be possible. Thank you all,
please.
lovely people on the chat. It was, as always, a blast. I'm really and I think this was really a worthy 30th in conversation. So really thank you all. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all safe in these very frightening times that we're living in at the moment. So please you all take care wherever you are. Stay safe, and all the best to you, and also stay creative. Don't let this all drag you down. There's a there's not so much I can say. I hope you all feel hugged and loved, and thank you, and bye till next time. Bye bye. And the broadcast.